Welcome to another tier list by someone who has way too many hours in Mario Maker. Today I'll be tiering the stock boss enemies in Mario Maker based on how useful they are for making levels with them. This is not based on how strong they are, because otherwise, you know, Bowser's at the top and Boom Boom's at the bottom. But rather, how easy is it to make a good boss fight with that boss? For the purpose of this tier list, a boss is defined as an enemy that is inherently globally loaded, meaning that no matter where you go in the game map, once it spawns, it will never despawn. Second is that the part has a unique part limit that lets you place fewer than 10 of them into one level. This is because all the stock bosses have these properties and everything else does not. I'll also be showing footage from my own levels because I understand that a lot of people who aren't really into Mario Maker who watch this video won't really know the difference between Iggy, Larry, and Wendy. If you're interested in downloading, my Maker ID is down below. Standard Loup&Snoop tier list rules. If you see two things in the same tier, the order that they are in does not matter. So here, Larry and Boom Boom both count as C tier, and neither is better or worse than the other. Also, tier placements are fuzzy to one tier, so if you see the difference between B and D tier, that is a substantial big difference. However, the difference between B and C tier, that wouldn't really be big, and if you come to me in the comments complaining about this, I'm just going to ignore you. Before we get started, one major note on how I'm determining how good a boss is to build a level with. Mario Maker is a creative type of software where the point is to make your own special level that's different from everyone else's. So a boss that is good for building levels is one that is compatible with a wide variety of different arenas, wide variety of different supporting enemies to also be in there with the boss. Is a boss that gives you multiple ways to beat it, and a boss that lets you make a boss battle that is reasonable, one that's not tedious, that is fun to play, that is not ridiculously difficult, and it doesn't make it too hard for you to make that happen. That is what a top tier boss looks like. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to focus on Larry and Phanto first because I'm going to kind of compare every other boss to Larry and Phanto. So everyone understands the rules. The 7 Koopalings and Bowser Jr. all take 3 hits to take down. And whenever you hit them, they retract in their shell to spin around. For the most part, they have very similar AI for how they move around an arena and how they shoot at Mario, although there are a couple of minor differences. Larry over here is the weakest of all the Koopalings. His projectile is very, very simple. It's one shot that pierces through walls and does not interact with anything. He is going to be the best for making levels. You could make an argument for B tier, but I feel like A makes sense. What makes Larry very good for building a boss fight is that he's extremely weak. As a standalone enemy, he is substantially stronger than every small enemy like Hammer Bros, Magic Koopa, etc. However, because he is weak, you can put a lot of different types of obstacles with him and he'll work. Because he primarily gets around by hopping, he's very compatible with a wide range of different arenas, and he's vulnerable in a very basic way, like it's not too hard for Mario to bounce on him when he makes it past the gauntlet of other enemies that you put in the room with him. Therefore, Larry is a textbook example of top tier material. Second, we have Phanto, which I don't have a cursed key on this tier list, so we'll just use this instead. Phanto has a really bad rap for being a really RNG boss that people don't get it. It's like, Phanto has one job, and that is to harass Mario to the ends of the earth. Unlike many of the stock bosses, you don't beat Phanto, you don't kill Phanto, he's invulnerable to everything. However, he swings at Mario to try to deal damage on a very predictable schedule. This is the kind of boss fight that's not actually combat, but rather you put him in an obstacle course, and the idea is that Mario has to constantly dodge this obstacle and figure out how to move through the obstacle course while also not getting hit. Because Phanto is actually relatively straightforward in how he swings at Mario, how frequently he swings at Mario, and he leaves a lot of open time for Mario to dodge other obstacles in the level, this makes Phanto the ideal type of supporting boss character to chase Mario through a section. So these two, Larry and Phanto, are going to be kind of like the benchmark for which I'm going to be comparing every other single boss. Next we have Boom Boom, which is the weakest of all the stock bosses. He takes 3 hits to take down, but he doesn't have any projectiles. His shell is more like a temporary defensive stance as opposed to running around an arena while invulnerable. Because Boom Boom is so weak, he pairs well with many other course parts, so you'd imagine for him to be an A tier. However, Boom Boom takes this a step too far, where he is too weak. He is not substantially stronger than a lot of the basic enemies, and some of the basic enemies are even much stronger than Boom Boom. This makes it so that Boom Boom feels more like a normal enemy as opposed to the actual boss. He doesn't have a lot of focus on him. He's more like an HP sponge. He doesn't really add a cool, interesting mechanic to the boss fight. Given all of this, I'm putting him into C tier because It's easy to put him into a level, but he doesn't add a whole lot to that level. Bowser Jr. Bowser Jr. is extremely similar to Larry. The main difference between Bowser Jr. and Larry is that Bowser Jr. sends out 3 consecutive fireballs, whereas Larry shoots out 1 bolt and then jumps around. In terms of usage, Larry and Bowser Jr. are extremely similar. Bowser Jr. pairs with many other course parts in a very similar way that Larry does. However, I feel that Larry is still better because Larry keeps his same moveset more or less when you make variants of him, whereas Bowser Jr.'s moveset can change, like he can throw hammers or shells or whatever. Therefore, I'm putting Bowser Jr. into B tier because he can mesh well with many other course parts, however his contribution is still a little bit lackluster. Wendy. Wendy is very similar to Larry. The main difference is that Wendy's projectiles are rings that bounce around the arena whenever they touch terrain. This presents a lot of opportunities for unique gameplay because the shape of the arena and exactly Wendy's positioning in that arena will change exactly how Wendy threatens Mario. The best way to describe Wendy is that she's kind of like a zoner, where she'll set up a persistent ring around a certain area of the arena to cover against Mario going there. While Wendy is fantastic, this nature of zoning a certain area of the map makes it so that it's harder to put other enemies with Wendy without it becoming overpowering, because if another enemy is coming at Mario, he needs an area to dodge to, and if Wendy's ring is covering that area, then it's kind of easier to get pinned down into a spot where Mario can't really dodge. However, I'm putting Wendy into B tier because there's so much potential with her ring with terrain. Next is Iggy. Iggy is very similar to Larry. Their projectiles are basically identical. It's a beam that goes through walls. The main difference is how they move around an arena. Larry hops around from spot to spot, whereas Iggy mostly stays on the ground, moving back and forth. While you'd imagine, oh, that's pretty similar, probably in the similar tier, nope. That is not true. That's not happening. The fact that Iggy moves around so erratically makes it so that you have to really be on your toes to actually land a hit onto Iggy. This makes him substantially more difficult, but I'm not putting him into D tier because he's stronger than Larry. No, it's because the point of this sort of weak boss is to put many other enemies or hazards in the arena with you. And if Iggy is moving around in a way that's really hard to land on, he will demand a lot more of your attention to actually hit him. Furthermore, Iggy is so similar to Larry that he's basically competing with Larry for the similar types of scenarios and arenas where you'd want to include him. So a lot of the time, when you want to make an Iggy arena, that same arena will probably be better with Larry instead. And this makes it really hard for Iggy to carve out his own niche. Lemmy is considered to maybe be like the weakest Koopaling, probably like tied with Larry. The main thing is that Lemmy's projectiles don't damage Mario, they just push Mario around when he shoots these balls. The balls have physics, they also conform to terrain, kind of similar to Wendy. What makes Lemmy one of the best stock bosses in the game is that he is a pure support boss. Lemmy is designed to let you build an arena with hazards, because the point is for Lemmy to harass Mario by pushing him into other hazards. This provides a huge number of gameplay opportunities even outside of boss fights. Because Lemmy is so flexible, he's easily top tier. Roy. Well, Roy is kind of similar to Larry in terms of his projectile, just he shoots at an area. The main difference is that he moves around the arena by kind of teleporting to a floor or a ceiling and then popping up over there. This is actually a double-edged sword and why I'm going to put him into C tier, because Roy requires many very special considerations to control exactly where he's going to pop up in that arena. And a lot of the times, in order to control exactly where Roy pops up, you need to spam a lot of sideways springs in an area, which costs a huge number of entities just to control where Roy pops up. This restriction is going to bring him down to C tier just because he makes it so hard for you to build a good arena around him. That said, he has a lot of amazing opportunities to make really unique arenas that you can't really make for anyone else. So he has his own very clearly defined niche, because he can just teleport to somewhere else. Like it doesn't matter if there's hazards or something weird in the way, he just goes there. Next we have Morton. Morton is the strongest of all the Koopalings. He has one magic like Larry, he has a ground pound that stuns Mario, that ground pound also shoots fireballs that hug the floor and go along terrain. So as a boss, he is a complete package. However, because he's such a complete package, he is really hard to use in a unique boss arena. I know this is going to be a hot take, but the thing is that Morton is such a complete package. He is like the entire boss fight wrapped into a single enemy. This makes it really hard to put other enemies or obstacles inside of an arena with Morton without Morton feeling overpowering. There are very special setups to manipulate Morton. However, these setups also restrict him so much that you're not really getting the most out of the Morton. He's so restrictive, I gotta put him into D tier. Ludwig is the second strongest Koopaling. Ludwig's projectiles are very similar to Larry's, where they are shots that pierce through walls. The difference is that it's a spreader shot that shoots 3 or 5 bolts, depending on how much damage Ludwig has taken. While just based on power level, you'd imagine him to be a lot more restrictive like Morton would, he's actually really good. Ludwig is the poster child for a bullet hell because the spreader shot will effectively always send out at least one projectile that is in front of where Mario is. This makes it so that you almost always need to dodge Ludwig. However, the only thing you really need to change about Ludwig is exactly how you position him to get the full effect of the Ludwig. But overall, he's very consistent and predictable in what he does. While he is strong and constantly exerts pressure with his projectiles, it's not so overpowering that you can definitely put a couple of lighter obstacles to pair with Ludwig in a wide variety of different levels, including P-balloon levels and just rooms that have a lot of room to dodge. The main downside with Ludwig is that when you get to the 5-shot spreader at the last point of damage, he can get really overpowering if you have other enemies in that arena, and it's really easy to accidentally make a boss fight that just spirals out of control with just absolute ridiculous projectile spam. But if you know what you're doing, you can probably manage this. Angry Sun. I covered this one in the enemy video. He's just terrible. The Angry Sun is like Phanto, but worse in almost every single way, because the main issue is that his trajectory is so locked to the screen that it's really hard to build a level that makes the Angry Sun a threat without making it a really unfun and flat level. And even if you succeed, the Angry Sun has a lot of waiting in his cycle, a lot more waiting than Phanto. He annoys Mario more in terms of when you need the Angry Sun to go somewhere, it's obnoxious to have to wait for the Angry Sun, as opposed to you hate dodging the Angry Sun, because dodging the Angry Sun is really easy when you understand like how he works. Next we have Pom Pom. Pom Pom's not on this tier list, so I'm just gonna use this red coin. She makes shadow clones to move around an arena and shoot projectiles and whatever. Pom Pom has very similar issues to Morton, where she's a very complete boss. While her kit is not quite as complete as Morton's, she is extremely incompatible with many other course parts. A fight with Pom Pom goes one of 2 ways. Either one, there are too many things in the arena, and Pom Pom gets to get her engine running, she has a lot of shadow clones, shooting projectile spam everywhere, and it's an unbearable mess. Option 2, which is the most common scenario, is that you constantly hit Pom Pom the moment she comes out of her shell, and she can never get up a decent projectile to actually threaten Mario. So she's in D tier because she really restricts your arena, and also restricts kind of other course parts you can put with her before she becomes overpowering. Bowser, King Koopa himself. Bowser has a really bad rap for making unfun boss fights, but I think overall it's because people just don't know how to use him. The number one reason why you'd ever use a Bowser in a level is that he's like an HP sponge, all right? You make a Bowser, you make him big or small depending on how much HP you need him to have, and then you deal damage to him with spike balls or whatever to get him to the right HP value such that it's not a tedious boss fight. Bowser by himself is normally pretty threatening and tough to fight, and so he always needs support in order to work out. You should basically always be providing the player some sort of way to deal damage to Bowser without it becoming a really tedious and long boss fight. Bowser is actually a really good boss to use just because you can tune his HP and make a boss fight that lasts exactly as long as you want it to. The main issue is that he's not very compatible with a lot of different enemies that you might want to put in the room with him just because he's so strong. I'm gonna put him into B tier, not because there's so many little Timmies who use him badly, but because there are so many good times that you can use him well. Meowser is not as good as Bowser. So like, Meowser is very much like Phanto, where he just chases Mario across the map, never despawning and constantly like throwing fireballs, pouncing at Mario, etc. The most common mistake is that people will try to make a boss arena where Meowser fights Mario and you have to actually get his HP down, which is super tedious because Meowser is not normally on screen to be allowed to be hit. I'm putting him into C tier because Meowser is pretty good for chase sequences. You can definitely make a pretty nice obstacle course, and you use him exactly the same way that you'd use Phanto. The main reason that Meowser is worse than Phanto is that he can pounce at Mario in a wide variety of different ways without warning and very easily pin Mario down in an unfair situation where Mario can't really dodge or get out of the way. This restricts your level design and as a result makes it harder for you to use Meowser well. The final boss is Charvaargh, who, yes, is global and you get exactly 3 of him, so he counts. Charvaargh is very similar to Phanto, where he'll chase Mario throughout the map. The main difference is that Charvaargh will slowly sweep a very large area of the map whenever he comes out. As a result, Charvaargh has 2 major downsides that makes him absolutely terrible. One is that he moves across the map really very slowly, so if your map has a lot of horizontal distance, it's really easy to outrun the Charvaargh. He's still loaded, he's still there, but you're so far and it takes him so long to get to you that he's not really a threat. Second is that Charvaargh takes up a huge area of level every time he comes out. The best way to use Charvaargh is in a vertical section with vertical auto scroll and moving lava. However, in this best case scenario for Charvaargh, he is covering such a large area of the screen that whenever you put obstacles in the level, it's really easy to accidentally pin down Mario in an extremely unfair situation. A situation where he can't really dodge the Charvaargh and the obstacle at the same time because there's no space. Like the Charvaargh is covering the whole screen. Charvaargh is so hard to use in a way that is fair and reasonable in difficulty. It's just F tier. F tier, he's bad. Anyway, this covers all the bosses. I hope you had fun watching. I probably put your favorite Koopaling in the wrong tier, so why don't you leave me a comment to explain why? If you like this content, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you around later. Bye!